Welcome to this panel. We're so glad to have you. Support and outreach is a key and a critical piece of what we do. And traditional services are critical and should be a priority. However, we've learned that from our partners that much more is needed than just hanging a shingle on the door and announcing the services that you provide. When you look at Susan Herman's work, she spent quite a bit of time developing a conversation about services and availability of services. And in Foreman's work, locking up our own, he spent quite a bit of time of talking about the accessibility of services and then providing the kind of services that the core group involved population actually needs. It's not enough just to say, well, here are the things we can provide, come pick what you like. We need to know what they need and the things that will help them, not just the individuals, but also their families and individuals who are connected to them and tied to them. So we're very, very grateful for our panel this afternoon. Mr. Keith Bennett from the city of Detroit, Goodwill, Michiana, and he also has a subsidiary that called Flip the Script. We have Deanna Hoskins, who worked and served in Cincinnati, Ohio as the project manager, and now she works for the Department of Justice. We have Isaac Hunt, who's from the South End, Indiana, again with Goodwill Industries, and then our good friend Peter Kemp from the city of Oakland. And we'll let each of them talk a bit about their work. So why don't we go ahead and get started with some questions. There will be no PowerPoints. Feel free to tweet hashtag @NNSC 2017. So let's get started with some questions. How has your understanding of the work shifted over the years? And why don't we begin with you, Mr. Bennett? How has your understanding of the work shifted over the years, and what has your agency, what's your agency doing to support this population now that it wasn't doing before?
My opinion of the work, good afternoon again. My opinion of work has shifted. I've been in this business about 40 years, and in the last 15 has shifted 360 degrees. I've been with Goodwill Industries 15 years, and I started a brand there called Flip the Script, which has probably served the majority of the returning citizens and young men 16 to 30 that we all speak about for the last 15 years. I had to change our paradigm at Goodwill. I had to change our conversation. I had to change how we had a maternal or paternal kind of opinion about the people we serve and even the funding. With that, for the last 5 years, I've expressed to my organization as well as folk in the city of Detroit, even other community service providers, that people are programmed out. Programs don't change people, people change people. Relationships change people, and so you have to design your programs around that model. Our young people are talked out. They heard every motivational speech that they can hear, and so I've had to share that. They're photo opt out. They're promised out. They're labeled out, and they've heard enough of our stories. And so what we've done in Detroit with the Detroit Police Department under ceasefire, the mayor's office, is shift the conversation from talking to listening. And so what we have done is shifted most of our programming around where we're giving them the platform. They have not, we haven't lived their experience. Let's face that. I don't care if you're a returning citizen. If you have not been on the streets in the last 10 or 15 years, you did not learn their experience. And so we need to learn what are they experiencing, and they don't want to hear our stories. We need to hear their stories. So that's what we've learned, and that's critical in helping them not make bad decisions, is let them talk themselves through their decisions, through their situation, through their life experiences, and let the light bulb come on for them, and then have the resources and people to wrap yourself around those individuals once that light bulb come on. And then relentless engagement. We go after these young men and women as if they're superstars, like we're recruiting on a college campus, like they're star athletes. They want to be treated special. And then with that, customer service. We have not looked at these individuals. We looked at them as participants and all those things, but they're our customers. And with any customer likes to be treated with great customer service. And so our outreach to them is relentless. It is always trying to please them at every turn. And so we had to change our model of patience. We're not training these folk anymore, we're raising them. And so we're 2 or 3 generations from them getting parental guidance. And so you have to go at it as if you got to replace mom and dad. And again, you have to recruit them as vigorously as gangs and other street people are.
Deanna.
Well, for me, I think one of the benefits is not working in a social service environment for the last 10 years, but working in a governmental structure, and understanding, being in a governmental structure, how you bring the services together to have a better coordination in what's delivered into the community. So one of the things that we were able to do in Hamilton County was take a look at, we were resource rich with services. The problem with the services that we had, they were cookie cutter approach. Everybody needed to fit into this certain size cookie, and that may not be the issue with the individuals who were walking through their door. And even though we were funding from a government level reentry programs didn't service all of the population. If you had a sex offense, if you had a violent crime, what was determined a violent crime? We had to look at services different to say, we, instead of having a qualification from a government level, if you are focusing on criminal justice, you service the criminal justice population. If your location of your facility where the services were being rendered barred out certain individuals, maybe you shouldn't be a grantee for our funding. So actually looking at it from a governmental standpoint, that if we're attacking criminal justice and we're funding criminal justice, we shouldn't be limiting individuals who are impacted by criminal justice or who are at risk for interaction with the criminal justice system to the grantees, and then they tell us what the restrictions are of who they can serve. Secondly, when we went into services was focusing on, again, we're going to get you housing, we're going to get you a job, we're going to make you employable. Everybody's not employable. So from a standpoint as being the director of reentry, I stood back and I said, are we even meeting people's basic human needs? That even the politicians, everyone who's at this table, these are the basic human needs that everybody in society needs to be successful. Are we meeting those, or do we have local barriers in place that are preventing people from being successful? And when we were able to take a look at that, we found out you couldn't get in our federal building without a Social Security card. Well, most people who are in the street life don't have an ID, a Social Security card, and if I want you to get into an employment program where you need an ID, it's kind of contradicted. People are going through employment services, getting to the end of the 6 to 8 weeks. The agency is checking the check mark to get paid, but the person can't get a job because they don't even have an ID that you need to give to an employer when they hire you for a job. So just looking at how we administer services and what is the definition of services? Again, I think Keith said it, it's about customer service. So as a county steward, how do we change the policies locally that make individuals successful that come through our system? If we know 0.5% of the population commits 85% of the crime, why aren't we focusing on that 0.5 of the population that the data tells us? Why aren't we situated in those communities that are more at risk of violent crime and criminal activity? But then how do we dig deeper to even find out what is the root cause of the crime and activity? Why is the drug market the economic choice in that community? Is it because of the lack of transportation and employment opportunities? Is it because the biggest employer in that community is the hospital and we don't hire people convicted of felonies? We need to take a look at that. So we were able to start to move the needle. We were able to work with the University of Cincinnati's hospital to say, what is the regulations of why you don't hire people with criminal backgrounds? They will put it on the federal government, but when you dig deeper, it's not a federal government. They are outlined within certain industries within. So we were able to bring in Johns Hopkins Hospital, the biggest medical employer in the country, And their vice president of HR said, we strategically hire people with criminal backgrounds. We look to employ the community where we're housed in. So we were able to start taking a look at policies. We were able to start taking a look at what are the issues that this population has that is preventing them from getting an ID, because you need a background check. Well, I have minor warrants. We were putting people in programs who still had open warrants. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get a job with an open warrant. So how do you roll back the warrant? Well, the agency, the advocacy group that's in the community can become commissioned by the sheriff to remove and recite people back to court for minor warrants. It was simple relationship building. It was simple things that were on the books that nobody could tell me why was on the books. Why do we release people from prison and you have an open child support warrant and the local sheriff got to go to prison to pick you up, so you walk out of prison, now you're back in jail because you owe child support that you was paying prior to going in prison, but because the systems don't talk, you now have an open warrant. And it was a cost to the local county. So was it simple to say everybody who's sentenced to prison, could child support get a list of those people on that day that's sentenced to prison, child support determine if they have a child support case, and we reduce the child support to zero while they're serving their time? It was simple little policy changes that have taken place, and on the federal government level are now becoming policies to say child support officers have this ability to do that. So you're starting to remove some of the barriers that people have in place, and just really looking at what is the definition of services and how we administer those services and how we fund those services as well.
Isaac. You probably go hear a common thing as far as social services checking the box. One of the things that I really looked at and I started seeing is the fact that social services was doing social service gang banging. Now, you only got a little pot of money, and we all fight for that same pot. So I get a client in my organization, but I don't want to share the information that he's been to the homeless center or he's been to the food bank, and we all trying to provide the same service to help the same individual. But at the same time, the main thing we want to do is check a box. Right? So one of the things that I really started looking at is how do we eliminate check the box? Are we really getting down to the root cause and the pain of the individuals that's coming through our doors? Say at Goodwill, we wouldn't taking people that had Latin King tattooed on their forehead or four corner hustlers wrapped around their neck. It has to start at the top of the leadership of the organization. And one of the things I can say about Deb Cobo at Goodwill is the fact that she's like, bring them in, we want them. It made a home, it made an environment where they feel welcome to come. And at the same time, we hold our staff accountable. You're not just going to do anything with the people that come through this door. As Bennett has said, they are our customers. First off, they're our family, right? And that's the way we really start working differently with the people that comes through to receive services. When we look at them, I don't care if you got a tattoo on your forehead or you have one on your back or you don't have none at all. I don't care if you got a GED or no GED or college education. My whole thing is what's causing the pain first, right? We got to operate like doctors. You're not going to go to a heart surgeon when you got cancer, right? You're going to go to somebody who specializes in cancer. And the person who specializes in removing the cancer is not only going to cut the top of the cancer off, he's looking to remove the whole core of the cancer. That way it doesn't grow back, right? And you start healing. So the main thing we look at it, we say, okay, we bring an individual in. I want to know everything about you. I want to know what color drawers you wear the next day. I'm coming to your house. I want to see how you living. Because you in my office talking to me, but then you go home, you're still doing the same things. So you may do one thing around me, but then go home and then you beating up your woman. Or your woman beating up your man. Or you go home and find out you don't have eaten food because we got pride. So what we did was we turned around and looked at it and said, how can we build a wraparound services for all of our individuals that come through? It's not about money. And my CEO clearly states that it's not about money. We still go do this, whether funding is there or not. And the clients understand it, and because they understand it, they takes it seriously, right? Deanna talked about the individuals coming in with no IDs, no license, and stuff like that. We build a relationship with the prosecutor's office, the parole office, the community corrections, all of the social service agencies in the city. We got one point of contact for every single agency for our individuals. And if I call them at 12 o'clock, the person that opens up the food bank, nor the food bank, will get up in the middle of the night and let me in to help somebody with some food. So basically, I got 110 children in the city of South Bend because I'm their father. And that's how we look at it, right? And we hold each other accountable. So these individuals look at it and say, I can't tell you to get out of a gang, but I can give you another family, right? So we want to change you from the inside out. And once we change you from the inside out, you go touch somebody, you go touch somebody, you go touch somebody. Now you're teaching them how to change from the inside out. That's what social service is all about. And we have been lagging behind for years because it's easy to get the low-hanging fruit. The people who walk through our doors that already has a GED or high school diploma, just need a resume, got forklift experience and this type of stuff, we're able to help them, send them to work, get them a job. They go to dollars, right? What about those that don't have that? Their father has been in the penitentiary, right? Their father's dead. Their mother's working 4 jobs. They out here hustling on the street. They ain't coming in your doors. So we go to them. Your brother was talking about giving out ciphers and stuff like that. These brothers are sick and tired of getting bus passes. I'm tired of giving them, right? I want to give you something that's sustainable. I want to give you some solid food that's going to fill you up, and that way you're going to learn how to be able to fish for yourself. See, and what we do is we give them just enough to bring them back. Because every time you come back, I can check the box. Every time you come back, I check the box. I get paid every time, right? When are we going to make it to the point to where they're no longer checking the box? They're bringing individuals to you to get help because they're helping other individuals. And accountability, right? I ran the streets. I served 10 years in the penitentiary. I wanted accountability, right? I wanted somebody to hold me responsible. I wanted a man to give me a hug because I never had a man hug me, right? I wanted that love. That's why I joined the gang. That's why I started the gang. So one of the things I look at as far as social services, if that's what I wanted and I got children, these are my children too. And I'm your father, and I'm going to treat you like your father. And I'm going to teach you and raise you and teach you how to be a man and a woman to accept responsibility, how you should be treated. It ain't just about get your GED, get your forklift training. Young lady, do you respect yourself? This is how this man going to treat you if you dress this way, right? Man, you open up the door, chivalry ain't dead. And so this is what we teach. So we teach in manhood and womanhood. And then that, guess what? It's like oil from Aaron's beard. Aaron's beard, it runs down. Everybody get wet. So that's what we're doing differently as far as the social services in the city of South Bend and Gary, Indiana. If they're not coming at us, we're going to you. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Peter.
All right, so maybe just to provide a little bit of context of how we do it out in Oakland. I work for the City of Oakland in the Human Services Department, and of the many different divisions that are within that department, I oversee Oakland Unite, which is the division that's really responsible for trying to head the violence prevention, violence intervention efforts for our city. Within Oakland Unite, we actually have many different strategic interventions, a little bit broader than, say, just crisis response and outreach. We also have a life coaching strategy, which is essentially life coaching, case management, intensive case management. We also have employment and education support services. We also work with family violence victims and C-sec survivors. So we have kind of a broad mandate when it comes to violence. And we've been doing this for quite some time. It's been about 12, 13 years into this work. And when it comes to street outreach in particular, Kevin Grant, who's actually in the room today, and he works with us in Oakland, he helped kind of pioneer this model in Oakland of street outreach that I think we're all pretty familiar with today. It's probably most closely aligned with Cure Violence in terms of their model, but I know this is a ceasefire conference. But in Oakland, we're taking the best practices and the best models that kind of work, and we're taking whatever piece we can, and we're catering it to our communities and to what works best for Oakland. We don't want to try to put all of our eggs in a single basket when we can try to pull the particular eggs from each basket and then create our own. That being said, we've learned quite a bit in terms of how we've changed the way that we approach outreach. So one is we've always been very, very focused on those individuals who are most marginalized, who are most at risk for violence. But the way we engage them has changed over the years and has shifted. Folks in Oakland, they're not really on the corners anymore. They're not really on their stoops or in front of their houses as much. So how do we engage them? We're being a lot more targeted, a lot more intentional in trying to create solid referral pathways. This is why our partnership with Ceasefire is so valuable. Ceasefire is essentially a really significant referral pathway for us to work with OPD to actually engage those folks who are most at risk. Another place, Highland Hospital, our county hospital. We actually engage them so that we're at their bedsides whenever someone is a victim of shooting violence or really violent crime, and we're in there to engage them at the hospital. We partner with probation. We partner with our county jail. So these different places, these different venues are where we're able to engage folks, because one thing that we learned is you can go ahead and offer services. You can offer your hand to, and support, but if folks aren't ready for it and if they're not quite willing to receive that help, then they're not going to. And why would they if they're doing okay? But if you catch them in moments of crisis, right, these are the windows of opportunity where we're able to kind of say, okay, look, you've just been shot, now you're lying in bed, and you're thinking about, man, how close this was to actually losing your life. Maybe you'll be more open to then accepting some of the support that we're here to offer you. You just came home after doing 7, 8, 10 years. You don't want to go back. Maybe be open to these services that we're here to offer you. Or you're just being called into a meeting where OPD is telling you that you're on their radar, that you are hot, and the next time they find you with a gun, they're going to put you away for a long time. Maybe you'll be open to the support that we're here to offer you. That being said, we're being much more intentional, much more targeted in how we're trying to get with the folks that we want to wrap our arms around. And we're also being a lot more coordinated. I got to tell you, I've only been with the city of Oakland now for about 3 years, but I spent 17 years working in East Oakland in the community. And the idea of working in partnership with law enforcement was not very favorable for the people in the community. That's the truth. And for all the different reasons we've heard this morning, right? That being said, we now see the value of working with these different pathways, whether it be OPD, whether it be probation, whether it be the hospital, because it allows us to engage these folks in these moments of crisis, folks that are really, that the data has shown, and their experiences have shown them to be at high risk for violence. But to do that, to have this relationship with these different law enforcement partners, we've had to be very, very coordinated, and we've had to be very structured in that relationship. We've had to develop our lanes, and we've had to really be very intentional in the protocols and processes that we put in place so that we can respect each other's lanes, and over time try to build that trust and that mutual accountability so that we can actually work together on somewhat of an equal playing ground. I think we'll get more into it on some of the challenges, but I'll leave that there. In terms of our street outreach work, we're also a lot less transactional, a lot more relational, and I think people have spoken to it up here. But it's not about just kind of sitting behind a desk and being this a person who's going to wait for folks to come to you, and then you see them once a month, you go ahead and give them a phone number, say, all right, now go see this person, and they're going to get you a job, or they're going to get you some housing, or what it is, and come back in a month and tell me how you're doing. We've increased our level of engagement, so now we have our life coaches, which essentially is a different approach to case management, again, much more relational. And we're saying you got to see these folks at least 2, 3, 4 times face-to-face a week, right? If not, you're on the phone, you're texting them, right? We're also reducing caseload sizes. It is ridiculous to expect a case manager or a life coach to have this intentional and very intensive relationship with someone if they got 20, 25 folks on the caseload. So now we've mandated you cannot have a caseload larger than 15 at any given time, but ideally it's more like 10 to 12 because we expect you to see this person damn near daily. If you're not seeing them, you're talking to them on the phone. We've also extended the engagement period. Because we're on a fiscal year and contracts are the way they are, and again, as a city funder, we are principally granting out monies to organizations and we're holding them accountable. But we've often been tied to these fiscal years. So come June 30th, folks have been expected to what? Go ahead and unload their whole caseload, no matter where they're at in their development, and then bring on a new caseload to satisfy the next year's contract deliverables. We say, look, that's ridiculous. Let's extend it so not only is the past year, but at least 18 months. Let's try to get 18 months of solid engagement time, and then also allow folks that 18 months to start at the moment of intake, even if that overlaps into the next fiscal year. We have the freedom as being a grantor to kind of play with contracts and work directly with our grantees in the community to try to find ways that work so we can effectively engage these folks. The other thing that I also want to talk about is what we've learned and I can't even say what we've learned, what we've always known, but we're trying to be a little bit more intentional, is when you work with these individuals, you are not just working with them and the issues or the challenges that they have or that they bring to the table. You're working with their families. You're working with the people that surround them. So that's going to, once you actually, like very, very sincerely and genuinely ask them, how can I help you? That's going to open up that big old can of worms, and you're going to now have to see, what can I do for the people around them? So how can we put those services in place? What services can we leverage? We've been a lot more concerted in our efforts to work with the county. They are principally the holder of social services in the county of Alameda. How can we leverage and align with what they're doing? How can we actually, at a policy level, work with them to open up access and lines for resources for this very specific population? Finally, I want to say that in our street outreach efforts, we've also worked really, really hard to lift up the fact that this is a craft. These people are professionals, right? They are. This is a field of expertise. I'd say, 15 years ago when Kevin was doing that in the streets, I think folks were still kind of figuring things out, and people were doing it differently across the country. But now we're at a place where we can see that there are definitely best practices. It has to be customized and catered to your own community, but there are certain elements and certain standards of training that we need to implement. So how do we do that? How do we raise the bar? But again, honor the fact that this is a real job, this is a real career, this is a craft again. Because what that means is we have to be prepared to build their capacity through trainings and through TA. We also got to pay these people right. People tend to think that if you come out of prison or if you're coming from the community and you're doing this work, that somehow you are at the kind of the lowest tier of professional. You're a paraprofessional. And yet they're out in the community, literally, this isn't even an overstatement, but they're putting their lives in jeopardy, right? So how do we actually, again, lift their ability to do the work effectively, but honor that this work is challenging, difficult, and not anyone can do it, right? And then allow them to say, okay, we're going to try to pay you, and mind you, so what we did is we implemented kind of a floor in terms of a salary level. If you want to apply for our funds, you have to pay your workers this much. It's not even close to what someone needs to live in the Bay Area, if you know anything about the Bay Area, but it's a step in the right direction. But again, how do we try to, and this, I got to also add this though, it's not professionalizing the field, because that word I think tends to have a certain connotation to it. We're not trying to get these people to talk a certain talk or walk a certain walk and put on ties and suits. But it is, again, honoring that this is a field of work that needs to be elevated and recognized as such.
Beautiful. So you heard me say earlier about how Foreman in his work and Susan Herman in her work talked about the accessibility of services and services being available to individuals. And again, it's not just hanging the shingle on your door and saying, here's what we offer, and here are our office hours, 9 to... People need services beyond the 9 to 5. And as you're doing this work, you'll forget what 9 to 5 was, because 9 to 5 doesn't exist in this world. In this world, you have individuals who have needs 24/7, 365. Thanksgiving is not a day that you can say, oh, this is my family time, so I'll holler at you. So the next question that I'm going to ask is about trust. Because a lot of these individuals who are part of this core group population have been in a system or two at different parts of their lives. Some of them have come out of where they were in the system as children. And they've been lied to. We'll come back. Here's a number, call us, we'll answer, and no one answers. Or here's a number, call us, and then they said, go run 12 miles on that side of town, go run 5 miles on that side of town. How has your work impacted trust between the core group and providers?
Branding is the first thing. The first thing you need to do is brand your service. Our young people are brand conscious. I don't care if it's Air Jordans or whatever it is. They're brand conscious, and whether you know it or not, you are creating your brand to them. Failure is not an option. As Paul said, no generally is not an option. You got to reframe your nose so it says, let's do this instead. And so the way we've done it is under one roof. We don't trust our Detroit transportation system. We don't trust our young people to go from point A to B. And so what we did at Goodwill, flip the script, is brought everything in-house. I have probably 20 service providers that come in. My staff and I don't have all the answers. We know that. And so I probably wrote, I think last year, $98,000 in checks to community service providers to bring their expertise in-house. That way I can control the quality that our young people were getting and nobody was dropping the ball. Again, protecting your brand. Second thing is expeditious response. I'm in the office and I've been doing it for 30 years. There's a few people in the room that know that. At 6 in the morning. I rarely leave before 7 p.m. And when I leave, I'm rolling in the street. As Isaac said, I'm going by somebody's house. I was just sharing this morning that over the Memorial Day holiday, I had at least 5 or 6 gang members calling me every 30, look like 60 minutes. How you doing, Mr. B? They weren't checking on me. They needed me as their balancing rod to say, I'm out here on the holiday weekend with all these other knuckleheads, and I need somebody to balance me to make sure that I'm staying in line. That's accessibility. My office door never, ever closes. Never, ever.
I can attest to that.
Really. My boss has said, but you meeting with me. I said, well, they need me too. And so your accessibility has to be as equal to the gangs or their street people, if not better than that. Mom and dad haven't been there, and that's why everybody else has their hands on them. So again, branding that you are the answer, you have some of the solutions, and you will jump in. And that's just not me. That's the ceasefire outreach team. We're accessible to each other. And I tell my providers, don't let me call you and that go to voicemail. Because then I'm not going to make the second call to you. I'm going to find another service provider. And so we have to partner and say that we're going to, and the young people are very savvy. If we don't love each other as service providers and they can't see that, and they see the opposite, we've lost them. Don't hand them over to somebody who treats them differently than you do. We all have to be on one accord. And so we've created that. The judges come to my building. Sometimes in their robes, just to make a statement. The Detroit police sends all of their rookies to my place and spends 2 days sitting in the classroom with the same guys they may arrest 30 days later. So they can see them in another light. And so our young people can see them in another light. So you got to we got to quit being competitive. And we got to become the family that they need. And so branding that it is a community that is supportive of them. The last thing I'll say is your environment has to be a respite, a retreat. And so they come to us for rest from the streets. They come to us for rest from their significant other, from my baby's mama, because she done beat you down all night and told you what a terrible guy you was. Come and let us lick your wounds. And then let's call baby's mama while you sitting here, and let's bridge that gap between her, and let's try to get her in here too. And the last thing is neutral ground. I've had so many rival gang members that walk in my place, and I think Paul has seen them, and look at each other like, you're here? This is not going to work. I said, oh, it's going to work. Because they have a respect for where they are at that moment. And so, again, branding is very important. Every no, you need to turn around and try to get it a maybe or a solution. They don't like hearing no. That turns them off right away. And so that's how we have their trust. The more yeses, the more, you don't have to hit a home run every time, but at least hit a double and say the home run is coming, and that's how you win their trust.
Isaac, why don't you take it?
I don't know how I follow another Goodwill person, but I'll try.
Roll, man, roll.
One of the things that we look at is the accountability for the individuals and also for the community. So we have a peer-to-peer group that we have at South Bend, and I was running it. I started it within the Goodwill organization, and I realized they see Goodwill as a safe place, but also I couldn't manage and oversee both things. I couldn't be everywhere for everyone. So what I did, I got another organization by the name of Amani Umadan, Deborah Stanley, and she runs my peer-to-peer for me. When we have peer-to-peer, guess what? I'm a peer. I'm not Mr. Hunt. I got my blue jeans on. I got my tennis shoes on, and I got to participate just like everybody else. And it's accountability. So one of the things that we do is We look at the individuals, and they said it before, they've been let down so many times. So many people have came into their life and promised them things and never delivered. Or they delivered to a certain extent, and then they just dropped out. We're not dropping out of your life. We're going to stay with you to the end. No is not an option to me. If a social service tell me no, we coming down to your office. We're going to have a long talk, right? And guess what? And if you're getting a grant from the city, I'm going to talk to the mayor. Because if you can't provide services to the people that's most needed, you shouldn't be receiving funding, right? So that's where it comes down to the point of, like, you know, IUSB, Indiana University of South Bend, was hiring their new director. Our peer-to-peer, we took all our clients down there. All our guys, let's go. We go interview the person that's going to be doing this job. Because guess what? This is your city. See, this is when they really start really getting a hold of it, that I do pay taxes and I do mean something, right? So the accountability comes in when they saying, you know what? I get a vote. So when we walk in the door and I got 35 guys with me, now everybody want to listen. University of Notre Dame, everybody. Now you want to talk, right? Because guess what? It's about changing policies, and at the same time, we're getting people to recognize these are not the less or the ones who are the missing fortune. These are our brothers and our sisters that need a hand up, not a handout. And we should be there to lift them up, and we should be there to guide them, right? But if we go do that, then they need some jobs too. They need some money in their pocket. I sold dope because I wanted money in my pocket, right? And guess what I did with my money? Gave my mother some money. I paid child support. I paid rent. So what would you think I would not want to work for? And I'm out here hustling every day. Nobody never gave me an opportunity. But when they gave me the opportunity, look what I've done with it. I got guys who have been in the penitentiary 43 years working for the city of South Bend right now. And when the city called me, they say, do you got any more of this person? Because they appreciate it. You know, you always hear the saying, when somebody get a college degree, they usually the one to come in late all the time. All the time. But the one without the college degree that's really struggling, got 2 kids paying babysitters and working 2 jobs, is showing up on time every single day. And don't get home to 9 o'clock and leave at 6. So it's about how bad do you want it and who would give you an opportunity to get it. So we look at it and we say the loss of hope is no longer an option when you're in our program. It's love. It's life, it's liberty, it's uplifting. How do I help my brother? Am I really my brother's keeper? Right? So they got to call each other once a week. We pair them together. And guess what? I check to make sure that they talk to each other once a week to hold each other accountable. Right? So John may call Joe, and Joe say, man, I'm dealing with my baby mama. He literally tries to counsel him on how to deal with it. If he can't deal with it, what happens is they call me. Then what we do, John, Joe, and I, we sit down and we have a conversation. That's accountability to each other. So now they don't want to let their peer down by making a mistake and doing something wrong. It's not just letting me down. It's letting everybody down, the whole group. So it took them from the gang to the family. And that's the whole way in changing and getting things to move forward.
Peter.
So I think, like the folks on this panel, you know, the idea of consistency. If you want to build trust with the people that you're serving, you got to be consistent. You have to deliver on what it is that you've told them you're going to deliver on, and you're going to have to do it every time. Right? You can't drop the ball, but if you do, you got to be honest about it, and also be consistent in that accountability. I think this was something that Keith had said last time I heard him speak some months ago, but you got to be consistent in that you're not a storm watcher, but you're a storm chaser. That was what you said, Keith, right? But that's exactly the model. We have to meet them where they're at, and we have to be there. If they're going to see you at the places that they're at again and again and again, that consistency is going to start to build trust. I also have Ricardo Garcia Acosta here with us, and before he had run the Violence Prevention Network in San Francisco, but after that in Oakland, he was one of our main homicide response crisis interventionists. Out of how many of all the funerals that occurred in Oakland, how many were you at, say, in a given year? Give me a percentage.
Over a 2.5-year period,
Okay. If you're at 150 funerals, and because these funerals occur within overlapping communities and overlapping families, and they see you every time, they're going to start understanding that there's a consistency to your work, and they're going to start saying, oh, you're that dude that I seen 2 funerals ago that offered services to the family. I'm going to point you to the mother of this grieving mother over here. So that's the kind of trust, that's the end that you can get. The consistency, anytime, any day. Kevin, he's 24/7. If someone is actually injured and at the hospital, we all know crisis and violence does not occur in standard operating hours, right? It happens 24/7 anytime. Are you going to be at that bedside to talk to folks and be able to provide the service that you need? And are you going to, I think what Keith said, are you going to answer your phone? Are you going to answer your phone when I call? Credibility is huge, right? I think someone said it earlier today, one of the officers has said, oh no, I'm sorry, it was one of the chiefs. If you expect police to be able to do effective policing, they have to have credibility and legitimacy in those communities, and you have to build trust. Well, it is exactly the same, if not even more important, that our folks on the ground doing the outreach work also have that credibility, right? But they have to be able to develop that credibility on their own terms and in their own ways. So one, if folks are organic to the communities, have shared life experiences, come from the places, come from the neighborhoods, come from the homes of the people that we're serving, that goes a long way. They also have to be proven models of transformation themselves. Right? They have to absolutely walk that walk, because within the community, people talk. So if your work hours, you are that you're that outreach worker or you're that life coach, but then in your off hours, they're seeing you acting a fool at someone's house or at the club, that's going to somehow chip away at that credibility that you are about what you say. Transparency, you got to be clear on your intention, be clear on your mission, which again speaks to that capacity building piece. Folks know what they want to do in here, but it gets to a point to be able to articulate that in the same way every time. So we are trying to train our folks to be very clear on the message, clear on your intention, and most importantly, be clear on your limitations. Do not overpromise and underdeliver, right? We say that all the time. So, but you have to know. Again, this is a craft. Do you know what resources are available before you start promising all the things that you can try to give them? And that transparency also then speaks to something that I think we're all probably dancing around a little bit is, what is your relationship with law enforcement? If you want your credibility to stand strong in the community, then you need to be able to explain that when you're asked, right? This example that I'm told all the time with Kevin is that one moment when you have a client that gets called in or is hemmed up in some kind of investigation, and this client feels like, how in the world does this law enforcement agent know to even call me, or why is my name even on their radar, unless maybe my caseworker, maybe my life coach, maybe my outreach worker, maybe they spoke. So when they call you at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and you meet them because you're accessible, and you're under that street lamp, in the neighborhood, in the community, and you're just one-on-one, and you have no idea what the result of this encounter would be, and they ask you straight in your eyes, are you working with police? You have to be transparent and know what to say at that moment in time, which is why in order to build trust with a community, you also have to build a trust with law enforcement, where certain lines are drawn between law enforcement and street outreach workers, so both can play in their lanes and do their jobs and maintain that credibility. And you respond to them. If you're a seasoned, experienced worker, you say, I do work with law enforcement, damn right, but I don't give them up any information. I work with them so that I can get my arms around you, and I'm working with them to keep you out of jail and to keep you away from violence. But I do not communicate with them. I do not share information with them, and I don't give them your information. But you can't say that unless it's absolutely true, or else they'll see it in your eyes. So again, how do you maintain that credibility? You have to build lines of trust also with law enforcement. And then finally, at the risk of sounding cliche, but I think we can all say we agree with this, is that it has to come from a place of love. That's right. If this is just a job to people, right, people feel it. It's very, these folks, what was it, Kev, you said you don't got a degree, but you got 360 degrees of street knowledge, right? These folks that we work with, and I think most folks here can agree, are some of the most perceptive, insightful people that you ever encounter when it comes to relationships. And if you're not genuine or sincere in your intention on why you do this work, they'll feel it. And it'll come through in all those other things, in the consistency, in your accessibility, in your credibility, right, in your transparency. So it has to come from a place of genuine love and concern, because this work, we know, has no real boundaries, and we have to be able to respond in that way.
Keith, would you like to comment?
Every time I hear Peter, I think he's a minister. I don't know what he's doing down there on that end. What he's doing out there. just to piggyback on what he said, we've had two instances where our relationship with law enforcement has been just the impetus of just to show our street guys how it works. 2 weeks ago, one of our 7 Mile Bloods, that's a gang, his girlfriend or his baby's mama called him and said that I think I killed somebody, another young lady, and I'm coming to get you so we can go back to that house. And so she picked him up and they went back to the house. He said she was bloody and stabbed up when she came and got him. When he got to the house was full of blood. And so he's following the trail of blood. He gets to the room and he sees another young woman, and he goes and he makes sure she's not dead. She's breathing. She was unconscious, but she was pretty bad beat. So they called 911 and they reported, and they're on their way out of the house. On their way out of the house, her boyfriend comes over with 4 guys, and they all had guns, and they pulled them on my guy. Now, he used what we have internalized in him is started talking. Well, you can kill me if you want to. I don't have a piece. I don't carry it anymore. This and that. And the guys wasn't here. And he said, well, we can handle it like men used to do. And they said, well, how was men used to do? And he said, well, we used to fight. And so they looked at each other and they said, go ahead, you fighting. And so they were fighting in the street, and then 2 police vehicles rolled up because they called 911. And my guy, being smart, said, when the police rolled up, oh, hey, I'm part of Ceasefire Detroit. I know Quincy Smith. I know Keith Bennett and all that. And the police say, I recognize those names. Give me your name, your address. Now you get out of here. You don't have no business out here. The second incident was our most notorious gang member from the Hot Squad in Detroit. They called him K-Boog. His name is Cavell. He was in the house last week, and the police was getting ready to break the door down. And he wouldn't come out. And so he called a ceasefire outreach worker who couldn't handle it. He was at his son's orientation for college, who called me. I'm getting ready to do a national webinar on training on reentry. I couldn't handle it. So I called another guy in the community. I said, look, this is what's going on. You better get to him and tell him, do not have a gunfight shootout with the police. And so he called. He went over there. Now the guy's hanging out the window like, I'm not coming out. And the police are trying. They got the battering rams and all of that. Long story short, they talked him out. But as he's sitting in the police car, I get a phone call, and they said, hey, Cavell wants to talk to you. I said, how can he talk to me? He's in the house. He said, no, he's out. He's in the back of the cruiser. He's cuffed. Well, how can he talk to me? Because the police wants him to talk to you. And so that's the relationship with police. When police know that you are a partner of theirs, it tells the guys that are on the street, they have a relationship, but they're not going to give me up to the police, but neither are they going to disrespect what the job the police have to do as well.
Please do, Isaac.
One of the things that we like to look at, and we call preventative maintenance. A lot of times we're always on the back end after the incident didn't happen. So one of the things that we do with the South Bend Police Department and the field of the SFU team is, if they know of some incidents that some individuals may be around, some gun shootings and things like that, they don't mind telling me so that we can go and I'll go and have a conversation with them. You know, so I'm not going to wait till after they done been shooting to have a talk with them. Let's talk to them before it starts. Let's get to them before it happens. Let's bring them into our fold so we can have a conversation with them that way. And I will ride the neighborhood on my motorcycle. I put lights on because it tracks everything. Every time they say, oh, that's a bad bike. So, but it brings a conversation. So I'm going to your house. I'm going to find out who your mother is. I'm going to find out who your uncle is. I'm going to knock on every single door. Before you know it, they calling on the phone talking about, this Mr. Hunt is looking for me. Right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, come down to Goodwill so we can talk. Oh, I can't come now. Why I come to you? Where you at? And while I'm talking to him, he trying to tell me where he's at, I'm already in my car on my motorcycle trying to get to where he's at. Because you don't know if me talking to him at that point right there or not talking to him could be the last time we could have talked to him. So that's what we try to do. We try to do more preventative than reactive.
So I'm going to just talk to a point that Peter made. If you're working in this work and you do have a relationship with law enforcement, let me say again, it's important to be straight up about that, be honest. One thing about the streets is this: game recognized game. And these guys are more discerning than you think. They live or die by their gift of discernment. And to be in a position where you're lying or you're trying to hide the ball, they'll recognize that quickly, and not only does it kill your credibility as an individual, it kills the credibility of your agency and the other folks who you say you represent. And now you're a target. So just be real about it. And so a lot of these things that we're talking about today, we're talking about at the agency level, we're talking about at the individual level, but some of the things that our individuals need, our guys need, particularly those who are part of reentry coming back to society, they need some help with policy. And some of the policies that are written are not written for them. Most of them are not written for these guys or with these guys in mind. And we've heard this, oh, they hate us, they can't stand us. And my friend Risco Lewis said, in order for that to be true, they got to be thinking about you. They ain't thinking about you. But Deanna comes from a wonderful position because she's been on this side of it, and now she's on the right side of it, and she's able to impact policy. So Deanna, could you speak to us just a little bit about how policy influences all of this work, and can you give us some specific examples of how policy work that you have done has been instrumental in your success?
So first, what I like to say is my favorite cliche. If they're not at the table, they're on the menu. So I think in another session, someone spoke about policy coming from the top down. That's how laws are come down. Never understand, and it's the same with programs when we write solicitations for grants. We make a decision in DC of what the needs are in the community without ever going to the community to say what are the needs to impact how we write the solicitation. So in my position, my previous position, I was very intentional about going to the community. I can't develop reentry programming or reentry strategies or policies without going to the community to say what are the gaps in services, what are the missing elements in the community, and then going back to the county commissioner and the mayor saying this is what the community said, this is what is needed, and I've written it up in policies to impact how we fund things in the community. And was very successful in doing that because what the community said, and the gentleman said it earlier, we've been giving out stipends, we've been giving out bus tokens, we went from bus tokens to bus passes, and all these elements. And I never forget walking into a room of elected officials at a community event and hearing a prominent individual say, they just need jobs. They just need jobs. And I got up and my response was, I remember having a convertible, living in a condo, working at Ford, but getting in my car, committing a crime, and waiting in the condo for the police to come. Jobs don't stop criminal activity. Right. So, but what are the policies in place to take a look at, again, the basic human needs? Are we a locality that have addressed when a young man tells me, I can't even get food stamps? I can't get things to take care of my basic human needs, and we push people into a survival mode of crime. And that survival mode of crime is based on the policies that are barriers to being successful. So, and here's one of the things, you will never hear an individual in a violent lifestyle consider themselves a victim. But what I always say, if you are in a survival mode, you are a survivor because you are a victim of something. And sometimes it's just being a victim of the system that has been institutionalized to create this barrier specifically for you. The people who are implementing the policies or who are making sure the policies are in place, they didn't create it. They don't know. But what has happened over the years, everybody who takes that job interpret that policy the way they want to, based on their implicit bias. So I talk about the pink elephant in the room. Whereas I may see a policy for an individual, and I may be able to read through to the specifics of your charge, the Ohio revised code that you were convicted of, and find out that that revised code is not the one that is a barrier to this benefit. Somebody else may look at the fact that you were simply convicted of a theft, and this benefit says a person convicted of a theft can't get it. But knowing and understanding how I interpret it, but then again, it's the understanding of, somebody said game recognizes game, it's the understanding of knowing who looks at you as a human being. Because when you look at individuals, when the person sitting in front of me is a human being, based on no matter what their situation has been, I treat them like a human being. Mm-hmm. I treat them with the respect that I want to be treated with, and I share that because I used to be on the other side of the table. Mm-hmm. And I remember being told no. Mm-hmm. And I would always say, well, show me the policy. Mm-hmm. Nobody could show me the policy. People were interpreting things based on their own implicit bias of how they felt about me because I had a criminal conviction sitting on the other side of the table. So once I found out that policy makes change happen, programs are great. I love programs, but here's my analogy of programs. When the funding ends, the program ends. If it's a very successful programming and funding ends, how do you continue providing that valuable service to the community? Because nobody ever institutionalized to change policy. Policy drives change. If you change the way you do business, you change the impact for your community of the individuals who are directly impacted. So on this level of policy now, on a federal level, the only policies that we really can affect is within the solicitations that we put out to the community. So again, looking at what are the barriers in the community that truly have the impact, but then are the individual agencies that are applying for the funding, what is the sustainability planning around this federal funding we're getting ready to give you? Because I've always believed if you're an agency that survive on grants, you just surviving. You are just surviving. If you are not an agency that uses a grant to either expand, to have a greater reach of a program you see is working, or if you have an innovative idea to pilot and you're going to use this federal funding so you don't have to go to your county commissioners to say we need more money, you're just recreating programming. Is your mission drifting to get more money, and once the money in, because we're in a new administration with new priorities, and there's a whole lot of people finna be upset with these reentry programs who had no sustainability programs in place. So now I'm sitting back saying, so how does the population most in need continue to get what they need if the agencies, so I always ask the questions, when we give out grants, do we set agencies up for failure? When we give out funding, do we set the agencies and the communities up for failure? Because the agency has a good intention, but the agency also is going to become reliant on this funding to continue to get that going. So especially when I see a solicitation that says, when I look at a budget and it's personnel heavy, because now you building a whole new program within your existing agency that's been around since 1820. That's showing a whole nother, you're building a whole new program that if this funding goes away, you're not going to be able to maintain. But then I also have another question. If you're telling me in your proposal that you're already doing this service, why do you need to hire new staff to continue to do what you already do? So it's just really looking into what are you helping this agency continue to expand on what they're doing to have a larger footprint in the community, or are you helping the agency start a new program that once this money goes away is going to not be a benefit to the community? So the people who had an opportunity, they're going to be lost. So those are the type of policies we can impact. But I want to go a step further, because the money we give out in the community is like a needle in a haystack. It's a needle in a haystack. So what I tell people, the federal government, yeah, we may have influence. We have influence federally. Mass incarceration, violence reduction is a local issue. Local policies have to be addressed. Your local human services funds have to be addressed. Your law enforcement asset forfeiture needs to be addressed. Street outreach workers don't need to work 9 to 5 chasing vampires in the daytime with a flashlight. They need to be paid the money to do the resources that are doing. So if you're not an individual who has the skill set to do this job, stop applying. So, but here's the advantage. Again, the person has to be a human being. It's hard for law enforcement. It's hard for law enforcement to trust street outreach workers who used to be in the lifestyle. And I think Peter talked about it, about developing your lane. I always call it drunk driving. Don't drive in my lane, police chief. And here are some of the things, because I'm transparent to the population. I don't work for the police. No. I work with the police. And let me tell you, to the element I work with the police. Mm-hmm. To the element of, if you tell me you gonna harm yourself, somebody, or you know about something that's been caused, I'm telling the police. Because it's called an accessory, and I ain't going. Once I have the information, I am now an accessory, and I'm no longer willing to go to jail again. So if what you're getting ready to tell me falls within that category, you need to know what my responsibility is as a county employee. And what I found out, they still would tell me. But what I found out, they was asking for help because they was caught up in a lifestyle they really didn't want to be a part of. And peer pressure was still there. They were asking for the help to help them get out of the lifestyle. Prior to this, they never had that opportunity. They never had that opportunity to go to somebody that they trust.
Exactly.
But also on the flip side with the police, when there's a shooting, a police-involved shooting, or a shooting where the community is getting upset, the police is calling my cell phone to come calm the community down. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you show up? Not only you have to have the ability, you have to have worked with that police department to develop policies for their officers who want to stand in a combative situation, standing point, standoff with the community, that when you say stand down, they stand down.
All right.
Yep. And if they don't, you pick up your phone and you call your police chief to call them to stand down. Mm-hmm. But those are the relationships and the policies that have to be in place, and we don't pay attention to that. One more policy I want to talk about that had the greatest impact in our city. Police would always say, Deanna, why do you get more information than my investigators get? And I would always say, because in the African-American community, once a white shirt police officer shows up with that hat, it does something to us called PTSD. Right. We automatically turn off. There's no trust, because in the African-American community, we have normalized violence. When an individual gets shot on the street, laying in the street, and the kid sees that individual laying in the street, we say go to school the next day. Mm-hmm. But in another community, when a kid commits suicide on the weekend, on Monday morning, the grief counselors are there, the school shuts down to show that that's not a normal behavior and that you have a right to feel. You have a right to express that. So when you've normalized a behavior in our communities, when all we know is that the police came into my house in the middle of the night and took my mother and said she'd be back, and she didn't come back for 15 years. That's how I visualize the police. So one of the strategies we came up with, it was two officers, a Caucasian and African-American officers. I called them hippies. They rode motorcycles, long T-shirts, but they were detectives. And these two individuals, we worked with them because here's the thing. I also had to be careful of who I trusted on the police department. All right. I had to be careful who I could call when I was told information. So these two officers, we got to a point that when there was a shooting, period, police in uniform no longer showed up to the hospital. These two detectives did. In their blue jeans, their T-shirts. And I remember the first incident, I walked into the hospital room, the police walked in, and he said, man, I don't trust police. And they said, me either. But it was that type of relationship, because what it didn't do, although he knew they were police officers, it didn't trigger the PTSD with the uniform. People have to look at little bitty things of that nature. It didn't trigger that shutdown in him. And then he had my office in the room with him, and it was a general conversation. Did he give them what they want? No, but what they realized was he didn't give us what we wanted, but he gave us more than we would have gotten in the past. He gave us more information. And the goal of it was not so much about who's the next shooting victim and who did this to you, but how do we get you out of this lifestyle so you don't retaliate on who shot you. So in understanding that, but also one more thing, and I'm going to be quiet, Paul. I don't know why you're talking about policy. But one more thing. We would show up in these violence reduction strategy meetings, and there would always be these dots on the billboard, on the map of shootings. And I would go to this meeting every other week and look at these dots, and it would say fatals, non-fatals. Mm-hmm. Fatals, non-fatals. Yeah, but this is a violence reduction strategy. Why do we keep coming to meetings talking about where the shooting happened and who got killed versus coming to the meeting to strategize the shootings before they happen? So that's when I realized police are reactive. They react to the crime because of the lack of community relationships that they have with the community. Community only calls police when there's a crisis. But if police was out of the car in the community, they can intervene and stop some of the crises and shooting situations that were happening and build the relationships. People talk about groups and gangs, but I want to tell y'all this real quick, and I'm going to be quiet. The judges are a group of gangs. The prosecutor is a gang. The elected officials are gangs. And when I address them on policy changes, I did not go to them at the judicial session. I did not approach the head judge in front of his other gang members. I picked him off in his own chamber, one-on-one, humanizing this issue. Same thing with a gang member. I can't go to the gang and start talking about getting out the lifestyle. Right. I got to peck them off one at a time. And it was the same analogy I used with the judges. I went to the top judge in his chambers, let's have coffee, and I humanized this issue. I didn't have to go back to the whole table of the gang to see it. I let him go back to the whole table of the gang to see it. I don't care who gets credit for it. We just have to get the credit. We just have to continue to save lives. But that's all I want to talk about with policy.
All right. So this is Gladys Knight. We are her pips. You came to the right one today. Listen, this is the National Network for Safe Communities. We are a network. There are a lot of folks who are sitting in this audience who could be at this table just like us. These folks are practitioners in the field. They love the work and they love to share the work. Please get to know each other, network with each other while you're here, because a lot of times while we're providing support and outreach to individuals out there because they need us, we should be providing support to each other because we need each other. We're a network, and this is a family. Let's do this thing, y'all. Enjoy the rest of the conference.